Hi, I'm Paul, and thank you for watching another of my YouTube videos. This time I'm having a look at MS Access and something I put together a while ago. This is a generic searching form. So I'm going to put the code for this on GitHub, and I'll leave links in the description of the YouTube video. So if you want to go grab this for yourselves and have a play with it, you can do. So the idea of this, I'll give it a demo first of all, and then tell you a little bit about how it works and how you can use it yourselves. So the idea of this then is a very flexible search form that we can give to our users. So what I've got here, the screen is made up of two halves. In the lower half I've got my actual data, so I present this data in a subform, in just a data grid. You could have it as a continuous form rather than a data grid, a data sheet. Up to you. I like it this way just because it means that we can adjust the column widths and change the column sequences and so on. Okay, and in the upper part of the screen I've then got, for each of my columns down below, I've got a search box. And as you might imagine, what we can do is we can just type into the search boxes and filter the list. So let's start with that now. So let's say I want to have a look at order ID 30. I can just type 30 into the box and it's going to filter to that. We can equally use less than, greater than, not, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So all of our usual operators we can apply, and we can narrow things down further. So I've said order IDs which are less than or equal to 30, and I might also want to further filter that by the order time which I've got here. So I could say okay, 23rd of October 17. And now I only want orders where the order total was more than 500. So what you can see here then is it's a very quick way for the users to get visual feedback on the filters that they are applying, and they can see the filter that they've applied all the time at the top of the screen there. So obviously there are built-in filtering systems to access, but I quite like to give my users this screen or screens like this one so that they can filter the data, get the immediate feedback. So you'll see as we were actually typing in there, the records were diminishing or increasing depending on the criteria we were putting in. And as I say, it's always visible at the top of the screen there what filters have been applied, so we can remove them very easily. Okay, so that is the essence of how this works. So another little thing, let's just put another one in. You may have noticed sometimes I'm hitting tab to move to another search box, and sometimes I'm just leaving the thing for a few seconds. So there's a timer on the form, so it knows when I start typing into one of the search boxes, and when I've finished typing, when I stop typing for more than a second or so, then it will go ahead and it will apply the filter. Or if I click into the next box or tab into the next box, it will apply the filter straight away. So if I say less than 300 now, less than 300, and then take my hands off the screen, and a second or so later, there, that's what we've got. So we've got a button here for clearing the filters completely off as well. So that's what the form does. Another little thing as well, you might have spotted at the top here, we can limit the number of results we get back. So in this sample data that I've got here, I'm going to say bring me back all the results, and we'll see that what we've got is 297 records in this particular table. So it's not a very big table, it's just some sample data. But it's always good practice to not flood your data with flood your user with too much data. So one problem with giving them thousands and thousands of records is, well, what are they going to do with it? And the other problem is that you will be putting an unnecessary strain on your database. And if it's a multi-user database, if you're perhaps using SQL Server or Azure SQL DB for your data storage, and you've got a lot of users and a lot of data, you don't want to be putting any unnecessary strain on it. A user is not going to be able to do anything with more than about 1,000 records probably anyway, so why bother inundating them with more and, as I say, possibly clogging up and slowing down your server. So there's an option here to actually say how many records you want to retrieve, and you get a little warning if the number of records returned is the maximum. So I've said here, give me the first 100 records. The system has said, well, you've got at least 100 records, so there might be some more, hence that little thing has come up in red there. Whereas if I change my criteria a little bit, okay, so now I've got 66 records that match, and so I don't get a message here telling me that there might be more records to have a look at. Obviously, I'm going to give you the code for all of this, and you can change that message to say whatever you want. Okay, so that's the overview of how this system works, or what we're aiming at with this system. So let's talk a little bit about how we put this together. So let's just have a look at what's involved in the navigator bar here. So I've got a main form and a sub form. So let's just close out of the form here for a second, and we'll go into the design of this. So my main form and my sub form. So the sub form, as I say, I've got it set to be a datasheet display, or it could be a continuous form display. So that's my sub form, and then my main form is where I've got my controls for doing my searching. So those are the two forms. I've got a third form here which I'll talk about in a moment. That's just there for a demonstration. And then I've got a series of modules. So I've got a class module where all the magic happens for all of this searching. So there's not much code behind the form itself, and not much that you have to change. That's the beauty of it. It's very quick to set this up with a new data source. So we've got the class module there, and then there's a few functions and a standard errors module which I tend to use in all of my projects, and they're referenced by parts of this form search class and by this form that we've got here. And so I need these in there to make this all run, but if you're putting this in your own project, then obviously feel free. There's just a couple of functions here, for example. You can just add that to your main functions module. It doesn't have to be in a module of its own, of course. Okay, so that's what we've got there. A settings table. I always have a settings table in my applications, somewhere where I can store some useful parameters. And this is just for the options for how many records we want to be able to return. So this populates that drop down box that says how many options do you want. So let's just here we are. So that's just populating this list here. So you can set those options to be whatever you like, whatever makes sense for your system, and also setting what's going to be the default one. So by default it's going to be set to 100, but you can pick from any of these other values, and there's a bit of code that says, okay, if you've chosen all, then don't limit the number of records that come back at all. So you have to use all as the keyword in there because it matches what's in the code. And I've got a couple of data sources here just for examples. So that's what you would need to add into your project. How do you set this form up for yourself? That's pretty straightforward. So let's go into the design view here. So in the subform, I've got to set what I want its data source to be. And what I've done here, if I just jump into the query view mode, I've set what I want the data source to be. In this case, it's this order summary table. But I don't actually want to return any records at this point. I want this to be set so that it's easy for me to work in design view and to be adding fields and moving fields around and so on. But when I actually run this form, the search form is going to take over the querying, and so we don't need anything to actually be returned by this. So again, it's just to sort of speed things up. If I have something that says, okay, return all the records, so it pulls all the records from the server, which may be time consuming and impact other users, and then we start applying our own filters and limiting it to only the top 100 or whatever we choose, then we've had a performance hit that we don't need. So all we need to do for our subform is set our record source and set that with a criteria like where 1 equals 0, just to make sure it doesn't return any data, as I have said. And then you can go ahead and you can just, as you normally would, add whatever fields on there you want to. In the main form, in these search boxes, you can add as many of these search boxes as you like. I've had forms with sort of 20 or 30 of these search boxes on there, works just fine. And what we do is in the tag property, we use the keyword search to say that this is a form which is being used for searching, and then we just specify what the name of the field is that we want to search on. So search, and then a space, and then the name of the field that we want to search on. Now, I haven't demonstrated this yet, but you can also use wildcards, stars, and question marks. And if you want to use those, then you also have to include this use like. So use like, and then search, and then the name of the field that you want to search on. Okay, so we can see how those are set up there just with the tag property. So there's a minimal amount of going in and changing code that you need to do. There's a couple of parameters that you need to go into the module and change, but the vast majority of this is just done by adding search boxes and then in the tag property saying how you want that search box to behave. So let me just come back into here again and show that when we say we want to allow like or use like, then we can use things like the asterisks. So P star has given me Paul, or I could do P question mark L, and that will give me Paul as well. Okay, so I said there were a couple of things behind the scenes that you need to modify, so let's just see that. So I'm just going to go into the code behind the search screen here. So most of this you don't need to change. I have specified with some exclamation marks where you do need to change things. So here you've just got to fill in what you want as the table or the query that sits behind your subform. And I said I was going to mention it. This is an option for opening all of the matching records in a detail form. So all you've got to do in here is specify the detail form that you want to display. So let's demonstrate that as well. So we know that we've got 300 odd records, but again, let's just say where the ID is less than 20 for now. So I've got 6 matching records. I can click on the Open Matching button. That's going to open that additional form I was saying was just here for demonstration purposes. So it's not a very exciting form. I've just created it with the form wizard. And that's going to open, but it's going to open with the same filter that we have applied to this data set here. So in my form, I should have just 6 records. There we are, and they are the 6 records which are where the header ID is less than 20. Okay, so we can see it's this set of records here. So let's close that form again. And one other bit of code that you may want to make use of is in the subform. I've said, okay, if I double click on a record, any record, then again open up a detail form, so it's the same detail form again, and just set it to whatever record I double clicked on. So I'm going to double click on record 17 here, and it's going to open up and take me to record 17 here. Okay. So the little bit of code that does that is in the subform. So let's go back into design view, and we'll just show you behind each of these boxes in here, each of these fields in here, on their event, we've just got the double click event set to a function that I've called open record. And if we go and actually have a look at that, so let's just do this to jump into the module. There we are, and then take that one out again. So here it's just one line of code saying, okay, I want to open this particular form, so you'll have to put your own form name in, and then which record do you want to open. Of course, the system doesn't know which is your primary key, which record you want to filter by, so you've just got to specify what record you want to filter by there. So I'll leave that in the demo one that I put on GitHub, and then that will give you an idea of how to put that together. So hopefully that is fairly straightforward. So on the left hand side here, you'll see these things in the code that I put on GitHub. You can just add that to your project. There's a few places where you need to modify the code behind this search orders screen. So just two places in there. They're both constants. They're both marked with the exclamation mark, so you can see where to change that. And then when you've done that, all you need to do is to set the tag properties for your search boxes. Oops, there we are, the tag properties. And there's a couple of events there as well. So these are for applying the filter when you tab out of the box, and also effectively starting the timer running. So once you start changing something in the box, then the timer is just monitoring when you finish typing or stop typing for more than a second or so, and then it will apply the filter as well automatically, save people having to, click in and out of the different boxes. So those need to be there, but the easy way of dealing with all of this I will show you now. So I'm going to change my data source. I'm going to show you two things at once here. I'm going to show you how to add a new field, and as well demonstrate that this works with SQL Server. So let me just rename that one. That was my local version of that table. I'm just going to rename the object so I don't have to rename everything in my form. And so let's open up that search form again. Okay, so here's that search form again. This time I'm actually using an Azure SQL DB database to populate it. And in my Azure SQL DB database, I have put in some additional columns. So I'm going to add one of those columns now to show you how to do that. So let's go into the design view. So in my subform, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say add an existing field. My existing field in this case is called categories. So I'm just going to drag and drop that onto there. And then one additional thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I set the event property on double click to be open record there, like the other ones that I've got, so that when I double click on the categories box, it will open up the related record in the detail form. So that's all I need to do on here. If it was a completely different data source, then you know, I would pop up to the record source here and change it here, and make sure that if necessary I change it behind the code as well, where you say what the name of the table or view is that you're using. So that's that part there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste one of these existing search boxes, and I'm going to use that, there we are, for my categories. Categories, there we are, and let's make that a little bit wider actually, there we go. And then here in the tag property, here we are, I'm going to say that I want it to search categories, and we'll see what categories looks like in a moment, but I want to be able to do wildcard searches. So I'm going to say use like, because I'm going to want to use the like operator. You know, I'm going to want to put in stars and question marks and things in there. So there we go. So that should be that. I'm going to click on my view again. So now we can see what this categories thing is all about. So these orders are orders in a restaurant, and this categories column is just showing me the categories that people ordered from as part of this particular order ID. And now I can do things like say, tell me where the person included a drink in their order, something from the drinks category, and we could even sort of combine some things, because these all come out in alphabetical order. I'll show you how to do this in just a second. So we could say, tell me everywhere where the order included a drink and a pizza, and where the total came to more than, let's say, 360. And as always, we can just keep adding our things here. So I'm going to say greater than 2nd of Nov 17. There. So we can keep narrowing down to things. One quick thing to show you on the date, sorry I should have shown this earlier, is let me show a few more records again. Obviously what I've got here is a date and a time. Now if I just specify a date in here, so I'll specify the second date, 25th of October. So if I just specify a date, it's going to match on the date. But what I can do as well is I could put the time in. Now it doesn't make a lot of sense to search for an exact time, but we might want to say everything after a time. So I want everything from 8 AM or later, so 25th of October, 8 AM or later. So if I say greater than 25th of October, 8 AM, okay, there we are. We can see that all of the records before the 25th of October, 8 AM have disappeared. So it does some stuff in the background to check to see the format of the date that you have entered and whether it includes a time or not. If you haven't included a time, then it does everything just by the main date. If you do include a time, then it takes that into account as well. Okay, so apologies, I'm jumping around a little bit here. I was also going to quickly show you this business of the categories as well, because this can be quite a useful technique when you have a search screen, when you want to be doing searches and you want to be searching by, in this case, the excuse me, the order header. But the order header obviously includes multiple order details, and those order details might have products in them or product categories and so on. So I've done this in SQL Server, and what I've done is I've managed to flatten the data out into this comma separated list to make it easier for people to do things like that search I showed a moment ago for things that have drinks and pizza in the order. So how did I do that? I'm not going to go in super detail on this. I'll tell you how it's done, and there's lots of stuff on the web to help you get there. But when you're using SQL Server for your backend, there's a really neat little thing called for XML path. Now, it's not really designed for this purpose of giving us these comma separated values, but you can use it for that purpose, and it's really handy for that. So what I've got in my structure is I've got an order header, I've got an order detail. Each order detail links to a menu item, each menu item links to a category. And so if I want my categories to be listed as a comma separated list alongside my order headers, then in my query here, where I'm querying primarily from order header, I can add a select statement as one of the fields that I want to return, and within that select statement I can make it give me a comma separated list of all of the items in the related table. So if I just show this for a moment, so this is without the XML path. Okay, I'll just have to comment out my where clause for a second. Okay, so what I can see here, I've got a distinct on it, so we're only going to get one of each. But I've got a subquery, and the subquery is joining between my menu category and my menu item and my order detail table. And then I'm filtering that. My order detail table obviously has the order header ID in it, so I'm filtering that on the order header ID. I'm making sure that they're in order. I'm concatenating a comma so that they will all appear with a comma between them, and then on the outside of all of that I'm doing a substring so I can get rid of any leading comma which is right at the beginning there. Okay, so that's how we go from having a structure like this, where I've got multiple categories that relate to each order header, and managing to get those as a comma separated list such as that. And I think that is useful because it then means we can do these kind of searches within our search screen. So it's a useful technique to know anyway. It comes in useful in lots of different places, but one place is these kinds of search screens. You can do a similar thing if you're using Access, but you have to create a VBA function which is going to get all of those related records and turn them into the comma separated list, and that is, or can be, slow. If you've got a lot of data to sift through, then you may well get performance issues with that, whereas the SQL Server for XML option, much better performance. Right, so that is my search screen. I've used these search screens for years on lots of different projects, so I'm fairly happy that any obvious bugs are well and truly ironed out. But please, if you like the idea of adding that to your projects, once you've added one or two, you'll get the hang of it. It's very, very quick to add. There's a whole load of functionality there that you're not having to recode every single time, and it's something that has been quite popular with my users at least. So as I say, in the description on this video I will drop in the link to GitHub, and then you can download this, play around with it, use it in your own projects, and let me know how you get on. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments if you think this is useful. If you'd like me at some point to perhaps go through a little bit more of the code and how the code works, then I'm happy to do that. But as I say, the beauty of things like this is that you can just pick them up, drop them in your own solution, get them working very quickly, and you don't have to learn all the ins and outs of how it works and what it's doing behind the scenes. Okay, thanks very much and happy coding.